Hello, and thank you so much for joining me here today. So this is my very first tutorial and very first little course on learning how to sew. So what we're doing here today is we are making a beautiful cuffed pillowcase, the burrito pillowcase, the French seam pillowcase, the three seam pillowcase. It goes by all those names, but this is no ordinary pillowcase. This is an incredible pillowcase that I don't even know where you could buy a pillowcase of this quality and this workmanship. That's how cool this project is. And for a first project, it's fantastic because it gives you that confidence that, yeah, I can make something good. I made this. This is better than the pillowcases I have. This is better than the pillowcases I can buy. And that's what I want to instill in my lessons. You know, I want us to make good things that we feel good about. My whole theory is to go and grow. So we're going to kind of learn a little bit of skills along the way to add to our skill set. So not everything all at once. We just want this to be pleasurable and a good time. Okay, so in this particular very first tutorial, now maybe you're watching this because you're going to teach someone how to sew as well. Or maybe you're watching this because you're learning how to sew. But in this project, we're going to learn some rotary cutting. We're going to work on some measuring. We're going to be doing pinning, straight seaming, some pressing, and we're even going to work with coordinating fabrics or choosing fabrics that we want to coordinate, or maybe you don't want to coordinate at all. So just a lot of different skills that we're going to be adding to our repertoire, and you may not even realize it's happening. And that's the best way to learn, right? Like you don't even know it's happening, but all this stuff is getting downloaded into the brain, and that's just awesome. So
now let's take a moment and talk about fabric selection, because we're all going to need fabric for this particular project. Now maybe you have something on hand already that you plan on using, or maybe you need to go out and buy something. Maybe someone's going to give you what you need. I'm not exactly sure. But for this project, we want to use 100% cotton fabric. Cotton is a pleasure to work with. It is the easiest to sew with, and it is just, you know, it's everybody's desired fabric to work with. So if you are buying it at the store, you will find it clearly marked 100% cotton. There will be probably a pretty good selection of cotton fabrics because of the popularity and the ease of use. If you are using fabric that you already have or someone has given to you, very often 100% cotton is marked on the salvage edge of the fabric, which is the non-folded edge. Sometimes it is not marked, in which case you're going to have to try to seek someone out who can help guide you in determining if what you have is cotton or not cotton.
So to make one pillowcase, here's what you're going to need. Now, I also have this listed in the description of this video. So if you miss it, just click the description and you'll be able to read this, these supplies that you need. So to make one pillowcase, this is a standard size pillowcase. You're going to need 1/8 of a yard of what is going to be your accent material. You're going to need 1/3 of a yard for the material that will be the cuff. And then for the main body of the pillowcase, you will need 3/4 of a yard. So all in all, around a yard of fabric to create one standard size pillowcase. And now I'm going to show you the fabrics we're going to use to create ours here. So here I have 4 coordinating fabrics. They're just absolutely gorgeous. And you're probably noticing a pinky girly type of theme going on here. So my mindset was we would just kind of incorporate a Valentine's Day gift into this very first project. So we're going to make probably about 4 pillowcases, and we're just going to mix and match these different fabrics. And then, of course, my daughter will get to keep one, and then the extras will go to some younger sisters as a little gift, which will just be so fun, and I think she'll just be thrilled with that.
Look at these dainty little strawberries. They're so precious. I just love them. This fabric was gifted to me by Missouri Star Quilt Company, and I am just so thankful to have it. And it's just so beautiful. Look at those. Look how little they are.
So this is part of the Sweet Shop collection by Maywood Studio and designed by Kimber Bell. And if you look in the description of this video, there is a link that will take you to the entire collection that Missouri Star Quilt Company has available. If you have any interest in any of these prints, you can find them there. Now, when you're making this project on your own, you can follow along with this tutorial, but you can also look in the description, and there I will have another link, and this is for a printable pattern. It's a free pattern that is put out by Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and you can go to their website. You kind of create an order, but it's free, and then they will give you access to this downloadable PDF, and you can print off some different written instructions with some images if having things in paper form helps you. So I just want you to have all the resources to confidently accomplish this project.
We are about to get started with step 1, but before we do, I want to talk with you about extra help notes. When you see this special little text flash up throughout the video, I'm sharing with you a special note that may give you some little guidance or help you through an area that is just a little challenging or a skill that you're struggling with. Step 1 for us is going to be cutting our material. This is so exciting, and I am actually going to show you 2 different ways to do this. One for if you've got the gadgets, if you have the cutting mat and you have the rotary cutter, and then I will also teach you how to cut your fabric without those gadgets, with just a straight edge, a yardstick, and a tape measure.
For this particular project, we will not be unfolding our fabric the entire way. We will leave it where it is folded by the factory in the center fold as we would call it, and we will be cutting just like that. So when we are cutting, we're actually going to be cutting 2 pieces of fabric simultaneously. You can see it's not that both sides is the front. There is a front and there is a back. So we will be cutting through 2 pieces of fabric, but the result will end in just a long strip because we will unfold it. We will still have the folded edge, and it'll just become a longer strip of fabric. Regardless of the method that you will be using, we still need to accomplish the same tasks. So the very first thing when you are cutting a piece of fabric is to ensure that your edge that you're working off of is straight. Very often, right from purchase, it will have a slight slant to it or a little variation to it, and we do not want that. Okay, so here I'm modeling the technique with the counters and the rulers, the tape measure and the yardstick. What I have done here is I have the fabric lined up along the counter edge. So we're using the straight edge of the counter. Okay, and then I have a tape measure stretched out here. Okay, and then I have a yardstick or a meter stick going across the straight edge all the way to the tape measure. And what I am ensuring here is that I have a right angle where the yardstick meets the counter edge. And you can ensure that by using a line, making sure it follows through. Okay. And then, same thing with where the yardstick meets the tape measure. So you see, if I were to continue this imaginary line, it would go straight through the 41, creating a right angle. And you can see my fabric is lining up very nicely. This has already been straightened. Okay, now if it did not line up beautifully, what we would do would just be move the yardstick to where we needed to. So maybe an inch further down or so, ensuring we still have our straight angle, we still have our square angle. And then we would just hold the yardstick and use a marker or pencil, whatever your preference, to draw a line with the yardstick as the guide, and then cut the line with a pair of fabric shears.
All right, so that concludes the no fancy tools method demonstration. And now I'm going to show you how we will use the mat and the rotary cutter.
Now, going forward, I will use the rotary cutter and the mat. Same general idea, it's just a little easier. But there really is no sense in purchasing all of the special equipment if you're just not certain, that this is something for you. Now, if you do a couple projects and you decide you're into it, definitely get yourself a rotary mat and the rotary cutter. So you can see I have this lined up here, just along the line here. Our right angles and our straight lines are so much easier to see. So you want to take your time with the rotary cutter. There are different styles. Some you press down and the blade will come out for you. Others, you have a little trigger button to raise and lower the blade guard. Okay. You are going to be very careful of where your fingers are because you do not want to cut them. It is not fun. You want to make sure that you are looking at the correct line of measurements. Okay, so for example, if we are cutting of this particular piece of fabric, this is going to be my sleeve. So I'm going to cut a 1/4 yard piece of fabric. So 1/4 a yard is going to be 9 inches. Okay, and I'm going to use my ruler. You need to make sure you have a ruler long enough for cutting the width of the fabric. And I also want to mention to you that in the printed pattern, if you choose to print that, you will find that it uses the abbreviation WOF, which stands for width of fabric. Okay, so I have 9 inches here on my side that starts at 0 and goes to 9. Okay, this side is going to show 26 inches for me in particular because my mat is 35 inches long. And if we were to take 9 inches off of that, we're going to have 26. So, just be aware that you're matching up to the correct corresponding marker on the other side of your cutting mat because it may not show the same number. Okay, so now that I have this nice and straight, I'm going to cut my 9-inch piece for my sleeve of this gorgeous little heart print. I'm going to put firm, consistent pressure on my ruler here. I'm going to hold it really well with my left hand because I am right-handed. And in my right hand, I will use the rotary cutter.
Okay, so I'm just popping in here to make something really clear to you. Just something I stumbled across when working with my daughter and this particular right hand, left hand business. So it doesn't matter if you're right handed, it doesn't matter if you're left handed. What matters is that your hands are going to stay in their own planes, okay? Your right hand is going to remain on the right side, and your left hand is going to remain on the left side. There's not going to be any crisscrossing over each other. So you're not going to rotary cut under your one arm. You're not going to hold the ruler over your other arm. You are going to keep your hands in their perspective locations. And this is going to make rotary cutting so much easier.
Okay, now you just want to give a nice, even, consistent pressure with the rotary cutter. The blade is going to go right alongside the ruler. Being careful not to nip it, careful not to stray from it. This is your guide, and you can just kind of roll along it. It's also protecting your fingers, okay? And you're going to want to try to maintain even pressure. So as you move forward on the mat, towards the end, you're going to also move your body to try to maintain consistent pressure on your cut. Okay. And it's always good to have a nice sharp blade. Okay, so after you have ran your rotary cutter along your cut, you're going to kind of gingerly slide back your fabric, because often, and especially at first, you will lose your consistent pressure with your rotary blade and you will miss a thread, okay? And when you just kind of yank this off too quickly, that little thread can pull and kind of negatively impact your print design on your cut piece and on your excess fabric. So just easily, very gently, kind of peel it back. You can see here at the end, I had to stop a little prematurely because of my camera, but you can see right here that I actually missed a little bit, and that's okay. Whenever this occurs, or you find one of those little threads, you're just going to very gently remove it. Okay, so there you have it. This is my 9-inch cut for my sleeve. Now you just have 2 other cuts to do. Okay, so here I am about to cut my piece for the body, the 27-inch piece. And again, I'm verifying my straight edge, very important. And then I'm going to measure out the 27 inches. Now you have heard it been said, I'm sure, about measuring twice and cutting once. Well, I think that's a very good motto. But I would say measure even more than twice. Maybe measure 3 times or 4 times. Because the thing is, with fabric, once you cut it, it isn't always redeemable in the same manner that you had initially anticipated. It may be redeemable in another way, but it's really unfortunate when you make a mistake simply by cutting incorrectly. So definitely measure at least twice, verify all of your edges, everything is lined up the way it needs to be, the inches are correct. And here I am ready to cut my 2.5-inch flange. And it's worth mentioning that when you are using a rotary cutter, if you're using a style with the retractable guard, to remember to close, raise your guard whenever you're not using your cutter, just as a safety precaution in case you grab it the wrong way, or you just start reaching and don't think about what you're doing. Okay, so here you can see my 3 pieces. This is all we will need to complete the pillowcase. I have the body. This is the long part of the pillowcase. This is 27-inch cut by the WOF width of the fabric, all the way from what we call the selvage, that little excess there, to the folded edge. And I have my 2.5-inch strip, which will be the flange. And I have my 9-inch cut, which will be the cuff portion or the sleeve of the pillowcase.
And that concludes our cutting for this project. So we're ready to move into step 2, which is going to be pressing or ironing if you prefer. Now, this is going to be the shortest step you have ever experienced in your life. And we will do more pressing than what we are about to do right now. But for right now, we're just going to do a very minimal amount of pressing. Before we dive into the actual pressing, I want to talk to you a little bit about the equipment that you will need to do this ironing as we are sewing. So you need some sort of setup, but you don't necessarily need the typical setup. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so here's my ironing board setup. This works fairly well unless I'm doing a really big ironing job. This is a fold out iron, also sometimes called like an over the door iron, but this one just kind of folds up into this cabinet door. The cabinet door is shut. There's a light here, and the iron will lose power whenever this runs out of minutes. Little nozzle here. If you don't have an ironing board, that is okay. You do need an iron, but you do not need an ironing board. There are times in my life where I have used a couple towels on the floor to do some ironing. There are times I have used a special ironing mat, which is also an option. If you don't have an ironing board, just borrow one from somebody if you can't use one of those other little methods. But you certainly don't need to go out and buy an ironing board.
So what you're looking at here is my previous iron, which was gifted to me by my mother. She was done with it, and I needed an iron, and so she gave it to me. And this is about 22-ish years ago that she was done with this iron and gave it to me. And I have used it for at least 21 and a half of those years. So it is old and it is worn, but it is good. And I keep this iron because it is an old faithful iron. And you can see with these different images here of it that I have here in the video, it has wear. In the one particular photo, you can see here, I have an arrow pointing to it. That is the dial, which no longer has the sticker that was on it that showed you the settings for the heat temperatures of the iron. I have it memorized and I know where I'm putting it. But all this to say, you do not need a fancy iron. In fact, some old irons are excellent irons. And I don't plan on getting rid of this iron until it just gives up on me. So if you don't have an iron, don't be afraid to buy a pre-owned iron. Don't be afraid of using an iron that is old. Be sure that you test it on some scrap fabric first, because you do want to make sure that it is heating properly and it's not, throwing out anything yucky. But don't just give up on it or think it's no good because of how it looks or how old it is. All right, let's get this pressing show on the road here. We are going to only be pressing our 2.5-inch strip at this time. Later we'll do more pressing, but right now that's all we need to worry with.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to take our 2.5-inch strip and we are going to open it up from the fold. You can see where my fold is here. There's still a little crease there. Our pretty pattern is going to be on the outside. We're going to fold our two raw edges, the ones we cut together, and we're going to create a long folded strip. And we're just going to kind of press it as we go, being mindful of our fingertips as we iron along here. And this does take a little time. You got to pay attention. Don't want to leave your iron on any one spot forever because we can scorch our cotton. Okay? We do have some time, but we can scorch it. And you see that just kind of holds it the way we would like. Okay, and you're just going to do that entire strip. That's all we need to do. Okay, my strip is all complete here, and I'm just going to kind of delicately set it aside. While the fabric's warm, we don't want to put any, creasing into it because it will be more likely to hold that crease or that wrinkle. So just kind of delicately lay it aside without folding it up real tight or anything.
Okay, that completes step 2. Wasn't that easy? Now, we're going to move on and discuss directional fabric before we roll into step 3. Because if you have directional fabric, there are some key points that you need to be aware of for step 3. So, directional fabric basically just has an up and a down. It needs to go a certain direction or it's going to look peculiar. So right here, this is an example of a directional fabric. We're looking at some sort of coral display, and you can clearly see that there is an up and a down. There is a top and a bottom. Now, here's another print. This is a print with some butterflies. They're fluttering all around. And this isn't a super zoomed out clip, but you can get the idea that there's not really a top, there's not a bottom, there's not really an up, and there's not a down. So this is a non-directional piece of fabric, whereas the coral was directional. And now we have this St. Patrick theme. Lucky little dogs here with some metallic glitter. And you can probably see that there is definitely a direction. Now there are words kind of going other directions, but they are not totally upside down. We can still read them, looking at them this way. And the dogs, their little noses, their little snouts are all at the same type of position with their nose and snout lower than their head. And so this would be a directional piece of fabric. If we used this upside down, we would know it. And now we have some cute little pumpkins here. And you can see they're just kind of floating around on their background, going whatever way they feel like. And so this is pretty clearly a non-directional fabric. Okay, I think you're getting the gist of it. I'm not even going to tell you what this one is because I'm sure you know right now already. So now let's get started. Let's hop right into step 3. So here we are. We have made it to step 3, the roll. And in this step, we will begin to do some stitching.
Okay, so we're ready to start with our assembly. So the very first thing we're going to do is lay out our sleeve. So here it is all laid out. Now remember, the sleeve is your 9-inch piece. It's your medium size cut, and we are opening it up from the center fold, just like so. And this is where the directional fabric thoughts are coming in. So I happen to have a non-directional fabric, so it doesn't matter which way I turn it. But if you are using a directional fabric, this is when you would want to ensure that you have it going the direction you want it to go. And now we are going to lay out the flange. Now the flange, we are going to lay directly on top of the sleeve, and we're going to match up the raw edges of the flange with the bottom of the sleeve. Okay, so now I have my flange right on top of the sleeve with the raw cut edges lined up here. And fabric is different. Some fabric has a printed selvage, some does not. I put my selvages on the same side just to make things a little simpler. That's not necessary, but it is a little helpful. And now we're going to lay out our body right below the sleeve and the flange, and we're going to ensure that it is going the same direction, if it is directional fabric, as our sleeve would be. Okay, So I have non-directional, so it does not matter. Okay, and again, we are opening the fabric entirely, so we're using the entire width of the fabric now. Okay, so if you're using directional fabric, it should look like it flows right now. Nobody should be upside down and right side up. Oh, this is going to be so pretty. Okay, so right now, all the fabric is right side up, wrong side is down. Flange is on top of the sleeve with the raw edge, matching the raw edge, and the body is just resting below it. Now I'm going to take the body and I'm going to flip it over right on top of this. We're making a sandwich with the flange inside. And when I do this, the body fabric will now show the wrong side. Okay, so here it is. Here's my little sandwich. Now it's not really evident until I lift it up to show you. Okay, so we have the sleeve, which is still right side up. We have the flange with the raw edge right at the bottom edge of the sleeve. This is going to be right side up because it is folded, right? And then now our body, because we took it and we flipped it, it is now right side down and wrong side up. So we have 3 pieces of fabric here. Well, and one of them is folded over, the flange is folded over. So it's actually 4 pieces of fabric along this edge. And we want to have it all lined up the best we can. Okay, so I'm kind of changing the perspective on you a little bit to give you a good view. This is now the bottom with all of the pieces here. And what we're going to do up here, and I'm putting you, is where the body is residing, all the length of it. We're going to take this and we're going to roll it up. And we're going to kind of use a kind of small roll, no precise measurement, but the reason being is we don't want to risk this being too wide. Okay, and you can see here I have just rolled over the sleeve piece. And then it's fine, we're going to leave the sleeve lying there. We're going to continue rolling the body down just a little bit while ensuring that the edges are all matched up with the body, the sleeve, and the flange in our little sandwich. Okay, I think I'm going to stop right there. Okay, so now we have the roll. Okay, you are seeing the exposed right side of the fabric here. Now you're seeing the exposed sleeve right side of the fabric. And we still have everything right here. Okay. Now this is where this pattern gets the name burrito sometimes. Burrito pillowcase, because we just made a little fabric burrito roll. And sometimes I've even seen it called a hot dog. So you could envision this as the hot dog. And now we are going to, I guess you could say, create the roll of the hot dog, or the bun, the hot dog bun, with our next step. So what we're about to do here is take our sleeve and bring it over top of our burrito or the hot dog and match our ends here, leaving the hot dog inside. Okay, now as you can see, probably I need to adjust my roll, and I'm glad this happened so that you can see. Not a big deal. I'm not going to just like roll this over and have it flop back over here, because I don't want to risk getting any of this in our seam. This is going to remain unstitched, whereas everything else we are going to stitch through. So I'm just gonna adjust this roll. Okay, let's see if it works now. Oh yeah, Beautiful. So we're going to bring it all over. And we are going to pin our fabric. Okay, so you just want to ensure, you can see pretty well here, none of our roll, which is the body, is in our matched up ends, aside from that one original piece. But nothing else from the body is in there. So right now, if we go down through the layers, okay, so verify your layers to ensure you've got this correct. You've got the wrong side of the sleeve facing out. Okay, then you have a wrong side of the body facing out, and the right side facing in. Then you have your flange with the raw edge out, the folded edge in. And that's going to appear right sides both directions. And then you will see the right side of your sleeve. And that's it. Now align all the raw edges, and you're going to begin to pin through all of those layers. You may find pinning to be a little frustrating initially. And it's, again, one of those things that's going to just take a little patience. And you can see I'm not totally lined up precisely the whole way down along here. I'm going to adjust as I do my pinning, which is really the whole reason behind pinning, is to just hold everything precisely where you want it. Now, there are people who feel like this is unnecessary. They want to skip these little steps, but and not saying that you couldn't create this project by skipping pinning. I would not recommend it. I would not skip it. But if you were to skip it, or if people were to skip it, you are going to not have quite as a precise and professional finished project. So there are other things that are going to seem unnecessary as well, like some of the pressing we do. But trust me, when you skip these things, the end quality is reduced, if not major problems. So don't skip the little steps that seem insignificant or unnecessary. Okay, so to pin, you want to make sure you're working on a hard surface. You're just going to insert your pin and then raise it up. Okay. And I'm going to pin about every 1.5 inches. Okay, and here you can see it's nothing fancy. I'm just pinning. And I'm going to go the whole way down and secure that. And you know, then we can breathe a sigh of relief because we won't have to worry about any of those layers shifting out from where they belong. Okay, so there we go. I have it all pinned. Ta-da! There's what it looks like. So do ensure that before we move on here that you have your layers lined up the whole way across. And now we're going to move on to actually stitching this that we have pinned here. So if you saw my introduction video, I mentioned this yard sale sewing machine that I like to use, and this is it. It's some sort of old Kenmore. It's a very good machine. Very, very good. You can see here the case is pretty yellowed. I also have a expensive machine, but this is the one I pull out. This is the one I drag around because I don't have a lot invested in it, and it really stitches very nicely. So if you're in the market for a machine, don't think you've got to buy it new. I talk more about that in my intro video. But anyways, this was $10, and it also came with a box of sewing notions. So how awesome is that? And they told me if it didn't work, I could bring it back. fantastic deal.
Well, here we are at step 4. We're going to begin constructing the sleeve or the cuff, and we're going to start with some stitching, finally at last. But before we do that, I want to have a little talk with you about thread.
We're about to do some stitching. You're going to need some thread. Maybe you'll need a little guidance on that, because when you go to buy the thread, you're going to realize that, my goodness, there's quite an assortment of thread here. Even more than just the color array, you know, all the colors of the rainbow and different sheens and, you know, metallic. But there's also the different makeup of each thread. So right here, I just have a couple. These are both Coats brand. The one is a larger spool on a cardboard spool. And this one has 1,200 yards new. Okay, and then this one is on a plastic spool, a large plastic spool, and this has 500 yards. So pay attention to, you know, what you're buying. There are different amounts on the spools. That does impact the price. And then we have, as I said, the makeup. So this is a cotton, and this is an all-purpose. So the all-purpose is a blend of polyester and cotton. So this is 37% cotton, 63% polyester. And then the cotton here is all cotton, 100%. And then I have another brand here. This one has 100 meters on it, or 110 yards, and this is also 100% cotton. So it is best practice to use thread that is compatible with the fabric you are using. And generally we use like fabrics in our projects. There might be some variation if you're making a costume or something like that, but typically we're using like composition of fabric. So ideally I would be using a cotton thread, so that my thread reacts the same way as my fabric is going to react to whatever it's exposed to detergents, to heat, to, you know, all the things, okay? However, that being said, an all-purpose thread would also be acceptable. So that's the general rule of thumb. Now, it's not going to be the end of the world if you use all-purpose thread on something that is silk. It would be best practice to use a silk thread, but that's going to be more costly, and maybe it's not easy to find. So that's just a rule of thumb. All-purpose, or ideally cotton, for our project here today. The white thread is the most economical. White thread can be used the entire time we are sewing, unless we are doing a top stitch, which is a stitch that will be right on top of the fabric. So for example, like this little design here, that's not a stitch but of a sewing machine, but it is exposed. So we would most of the time want to blend in when we do that, and we would want to match our thread to our fabric for the most part, unless we were trying to create something that, you know, stood out intentionally. So white thread most of the time, unless we're top stitching or we're doing a visible stitch that we want to blend in and be seamless, and then we would use color. Now if you only have color, it's okay, it's not really going to show up, but you don't need to have the expense of buying a colored thread for our stitching on this pillowcase. Okay, so we're about to get the stitching underway here. My machine is all ready. I've got my white thread on, and now this is not mentioned in the printable pattern that I shared with you, so I'm going to tell you here now. Take note. You are going to do a 1/4 inch seam for this particular seam. So our very first seam is going to be a 1/4 inch seam. Now, there are so many different styles of feet. That's this here, and different markings on machines, different lines. There are even magnets you can use to put on this metal here that will kind of give you your seam allowance, is what we call that, the measurement of what we're going to stitch at. You can see there's an 1/8 marked here, 3/8, 5/8. There's things marked here, Up here, it's everywhere. So this particular foot that I'm using is a 1/4 inch foot. So the side of the foot is a 1/4 of an inch, and that is what we are going for. So I will just follow the edge of my presser foot there. If you don't know what your foot is, you can measure it. If you don't know, what the markings are, even if you do, something you can use if you don't have the magnet, they make special stickers that you can apply to help you stay within your parameters. But if you don't have all that, a piece of painter's tape is an excellent thing that you can just adhere to. It will come off real easy, and that can be used to just help guide you. Okay, now we are going to do a little back stitching or back tacking at the beginning and the end. And my rule of thumb is to not run over pins. Some folks do, some folks don't. I generally, it works out okay going over them, but once in a while you kind of mess up your needle a little bit. I'm not into that, so I remove mine as I go along. So keep an eye of where your fingers are. Remember, slow and steady wins the race. Okay, so stitching is complete, and we now have this, this tube here, or the burrito, whatever you want to call it, and it is now time to unstuff it. So what we're going to do is we're going to reach in here, and we're actually going to pull the body out and kind of turn this all the right way. Think of it kind of like, it's kind of like an inside out pantyhose type of situation. It's just going to take a little bit of patience. And it does require a little bit of a delicate touch. We don't want to tear any stitching out or stretch anything.
Okay, are you starting to get the idea here of what's happening? It's starting to become something you can actually visualize. So I'm back at the ironing board. I have it totally pulled out of that tube, and this is what will be the outside of the pillowcase that we're looking at right now. That would be the inside of the pillowcase, and look at the seam there. So neat. So what we're going to do is we're going to press, and we're going to just press that seam upwards towards the fold. We want all of the seams to be pressed as open as possible. Our flange is going to lay downward, not towards the top fold of the pillowcase, but down towards what will be the other part of the pillowcase.
Oh, so look at that. Isn't it precious? So pretty. Okay, so you saw me pressing this way. I also want to mention, after you do that, you need to flip it over and press this way, because you can kind of see here, I intentionally didn't get this out entirely, but you can see there was a little fold. There's also a little mark from my 1/4 inch seam, but there was a little fold, and from pressing the other side, that was unnoticed. So you see here, there was excess fabric on the other side. So what you have to do is you have to flip over and then make sure you're pressing up this way, because there will most likely be fabric that needs pushed up and pressed, and then you can flip it again, give it a little more pressing on this side to get it totally nice and smooth. And that is a thing that a lot of people would feel tempted to skip, but it's going to make a difference in your finished product, like we talked about before.
And that completes the sleeve portion of our project. And isn't it so awesome looking? Okay, and now we're ready to start our 5th part, which will be assembly. And we'll be assembling the sides of the pillow and then the bottom edge of the pillowcase, and then encasing those in the French seams. To start off step 5, we're going to fold our fabric again at that original factory fold. We will have the right sides facing out, and our cuff will be directly on top of the cuff on the other side.
First, we have to take care of our salvage edges, which may have printing on them or may not, depending on your fabric. So try as we may to match things up, there's still going to be some discrepancies. Do you see here that this fabric is lined up and then not lined up, and we have salvage coming up a little higher here? So what we need to do is we need to take off about an inch, and that's going to just square up all of that. Okay, so for my cutting here, I don't have a long enough ruler with me at this moment, and instead of going to get a different one, I am just going to show you how we will do this without a longer ruler in case you're in that particular situation. So if you see here, I am utilizing a tape measure again. I have my ruler over here lined up with an inch, and I have my tape measure here lined up with the inch, transcending to my ruler and just lining up with that. So now what I'm going to do, so this ensures that my ruler here, where I can't see an inch mark, is still at an inch. And I can also, if I just need to double verify, I can just lift my tape measure temporarily without moving my ruler, line it up, yep, that is correct, and put it back here. And now what I'm going to do is just use a fabric pencil or a pencil, and I'm going to draw a line all the way to my end of my ruler, and you can see my line here. If you don't have fabric pencils, you can use colored pencils as well. If you have a darker fabric, like a light colored pencil might show up better. Now I'm just going to line my ruler up with the line I already made and the line here on my mat, and I'm going to finish my pencil line. And so now you could use your rotary cutter or your fabric shears to cut the line. Of course, if you're using the rotary cutter, you will use your ruler as well. I'm going to use the shears this time and share with you a little bit about using fabric shears. So fabric shears are made with a flat base, like so. The reason for that is because they're designed to just kind of slide along on your base as you cut. Your top finger is going to move, your thumb, and you're just going to kind of go along, and that gives you some stability in your cutting. Okay, so we have that all done. Now we're going to pin this edge just to secure it, because we're going to be turning this to work on the bottom edge. But before we do that, we want to verify that our seams here are matching up, and they are, because we want this to line up beautifully at the seam whenever our project is finished. Okay, and here's all my pins. You may notice I don't have quite as many as I did last time because I'm not pinning quite as much stuff. Just 2 layers here, and the cuff is a little thicker. And I am avoiding the bottom here because we are going to be cutting down here, and I don't want to risk running into a pin. Also, I want to bring to your attention, here is my seam, and I like to pin on either side of a seam when I am trying to secure seams together. Pinning directly on top of the seam is a little tricky because you have extra bulk, and actually it can cause a little more shifting just doing that. So just on either side of the seam, we'll hold it nice and securely there. And now we're going to rotate this so we can work on the bottom edge. Okay, so now I'm just going to pin across the bottom edge here to just hold those 2 pieces together. And I'm realizing it might be helpful for me to show you how I pin if you're struggling with that. What I do is I take my fingers like this. So this is my non-dominant hand, and I will hold them down on the fabric with the intention of pinning between those two fingers, like this. So I want to put my next pin somewhere in there. So I'm holding the fabric down with these two fingers so it doesn't wobble around and shift around and lift up. Okay, and then I take a pin in my dominant hand, hold it primarily a little back from the needle of the head. My thumb will kind of rest on to give me some support. Kind of almost like a pencil hold is how I do it. And then I just go in between there, insert, raise up, and push through. And that's just how I do it. There's probably other ways. And now I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down the side, tacking at the beginning and end or back stitching, and then I'm going to go a 1/4 inch seam all the way across the bottom, tacking or back stitching at start and finish. Okay, so seams are stitched here, 1/4 inch, and now we need to trim these down a little bit. Now you can use a rotary cutter, you can use your shears. We are going to cut these down to 1/8 inch, which is very, very small. If you feel more comfortable using the shears, definitely do it, because you do have more control that way, and you certainly don't want to mess up this project, right? But we're going to go ahead and do that, and this is where we start creating those French seams. If you are using the shears, it's helpful to keep hold of what you're trimming off. You don't need to measure exactly 1/8 inch. You just essentially know that 1/8 inch is half of what you stitched, basically. And this is just to keep our seams from getting bulky. I'm just going to turn it. And turn the other. And where your two rows of stitching come together in the corner, you're just going to cut right through that.
Now, when you get to the area where we have the double seams lined up, you will find it a little more difficult to cut through there, but you will be just fine. And once we finish this trimming, we're going to head back to the ironing board.
So I'm just turning it inside out, and this doesn't seem quite right, does it? Like, what are we doing here? But this is where the magic happens. Okay, make sure you get your corners pushed through really well. There is a tool known as a turning tool that you could use. You can also just really take your time getting it out, or use a chopstick. Some folks use a pencil, but you have to be careful that you don't push it too far. Okay, so what we're going to do here on our two seams, we're going to just push like this right at the 1/8 inch seam that we stitched before, and just try to open it as much as we can, and then we're going to press over that. And we're also going to press on the folded side as well to get a nice crisp bend there. So after you have your seams pressed, you are going to then press the other direction to the folded side. Okay? And just smooth all of that through. Okay, and there it is, all pressed and ready to go. Looks pretty good even inside out, doesn't it? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to put a couple pins just to hold our fabric, because we have to stitch the side and bottom again, just like this, with the pillowcase turned inside out. This is going to fully encase our previous stitching and leave no ends exposed, which is what is so marvelous about this pillowcase. So we're going to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance this time. We're going to sew top to bottom on the side. We're going to back stitch or tack, and then we're going to do the bottom. Okay, I am ready to stitch. I just want to mention that again, I am pinning on either side of my seam here for the sleeve. I don't want it to become, disaligned here at our final stitching session.
Here we are. We're at step 6. This is our final step, and we are going to finish those French seams. We're going to encase the seams and be done with them. So let's get started here.
So remember, we are now using a 3/8 of an inch. So you need to adjust how you are going to be stitching. For me personally, that's going to be this first line in my metal here that I will be following. So this is where it is so important that you have your seam pushed out as much as you can, because if you don't, you are going to catch it with your new line of stitching. Okay, so now our original seam is stitched inside of our new seam, and now we can turn this the right way once again. All right, and now we're going to give it one last final press. It is finished, folks. Look at the beautiful seam. Look at the inside. And just with our last pressing, we're going to do our best to press our seam out and to keep it nice and lined up. Work it out. It'll be a little easier this time because it's going to be a little thicker to feel it and push it out. Okay. Okay, and so there we have it. Totally complete, gorgeous pillowcase. Seams are all encased. You can't even buy a pillowcase like this that I know of. Beautiful. So I hope that you have enjoyed this project. I would love to hear what you found most challenging in this project, or what you found to be the easiest, or what you thought of it. I would love to hear. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like and subscribe so you can see when I post additional sewing videos.
And remember to look in the description of this video. There you're going to find the link to this particular fabric if you're interested in it, from Missouri Star Quilt Company. You're going to find the link for the free printable pattern. And also, I'm going to put the link to the playlist that all of these different Go and Grow sewing lessons will be posted in, so you can see what has come before and what has come after this particular video.